So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this joint webinar, the first joint webinar that docVinci has ever done. And today we're going to be looking at how to build the perfect annual review document. It's been by far the most popular one that we've ever done, which is good to see because it means everybody wants to improve the stuff that they send to their clients. Today, I'm joined by someone that I would imagine a lot of you in the audience will know and will have heard of before, and that is Sasha Wakefield from the Paraplan Project. How are you doing today, Sasha?
I'm good, thank you, Dan. How are you doing?
Good. I'm all right, thank you. Did you have a nice bank holiday weekend? I've just asked you that question beforehand, but how was your bank holiday weekend?
Yeah, very chilled, ready to go for today for the webinar. So,
See, the thing is, I know that people have been waiting like 3 weeks with this in their diaries, so we've got a lot to come through with today, haven't we? Because people have been really looking forward to this one.
yeah, we might have a few hangover heads maybe this morning for people joining.
Well, what better way to cure a hangover than to talk about annual review documents as well? So
Oh, absolutely.
this is probably the one that when we're working with people at docVinci, and I imagine the same as you, Sasha, when you're working with people, it's the one where nobody really knows if they're doing this stuff good, bad, right, wrong. They're saying too much, they're saying too little, they're not doing it right, and they never really know what's the best way to do things. And when we were kind of coming up with the title for today's webinar, perfect was I mean, it's obviously a bit of clickbait from myself. I am a marketeer after all. But what we're going to show you today is 10 of the key things, a lot of the key things that we really would like to see in these and that we kind of recommend to people when we're working with them as well. So first thing to do is to grab the slides. And there's already one loaded there. Sash, can you see my screen okay there?
I can, yeah.
And if I click on the screen and then go to full screen mode, is that looking how we want it to look on your side?
Looking spot on, Dan.
Perfect. Okay, let's get started because we've got a lot to get through today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through 10 great ideas and key points to include in your annual review documents. But as you can see on the right-hand side, and Sasha's definitely warned me to say this, is that we're not compliance consultants. This is not a tick box exercise where we'll go through the 6 things that you need to include or everything that needs to be in these documents or anything like that. Because the truth is that because of the way our profession is regulated, everybody's got a different opinion on that kind of stuff and it's quite subjective. So we're not going to try today and be prescriptive with what should be in these documents, but we're going to look at instead what clients want to see and what is really beneficial to them and really what the regulator wants to see in terms of client outcomes and that kind of stuff as well. I should mention, by the way, as well, there is a Q&A function today. So if anybody wants to drop any questions in there, we'll either come to them throughout. I would imagine we'll probably get them answered at the end of the session today. And I've got one already. Wilf asking, do we get a copy of the slides? Yes, you will get a copy of the slides. So number one is, I think this is one won't come as a shock to anybody, but it is less is more. So when we're working on these documents with a lot of people, there's a real kind of difference between some people who chuck every single thing that they've ever said to the clients and everything that could possibly be information for the client or useful for the client in these documents. And the problem with what that does is what we find is that it makes it a task. It makes it something that the client actually has to sit and do. There are obviously those clients who will want more, like, for example, engineers and teachers and all the ones we normally come across. But for the majority of your clients, less is definitely more. And the job of a good financial planner, I think you would all agree, is to distill that really complicated technical information into a very simple, kind of clear message that people can pick up, understand, get on with their life. And that's really what good financial planning is. It's making difficult things feel simple. So what we find is that length is definitely one of the biggest factors in comprehension. A 60-page annual review doc is completely different to a 12, 13, even less page annual review report. The task for a client and the difference between reading those two is completely different. And therefore, by really you're under informing clients and not under informing, but you're leaving stuff out in the aim of actually getting them to understand the really key points that you're trying to get across to them. There's no way that you'll be able to get across to your clients every single thing that they need to know. So we just need to pick out the key points and make sure that they understand the really critical points. And that's what we're trying to do with the length part of it. And as we've already mentioned, your goal here should be to condense this kind of stuff and not necessarily to inflate. So, like we've already said, there's so much stuff that you can put in. You can put cash flow in, you can put all the charges in, you can put, performance figures, you can put all their plans and policies. There's a pretty much endless amount of things that you can put into these documents. But your goal really should always be in the back of your mind to be thinking, how can I condense this into a smaller report or a report with less pages or something like that, just to make it really, again, really clear and simple for clients to understand. And this is something that Sasha will talk about in the next point, but it's that signposting to other information we find is the way to go. And Sasha will talk about that more in a second. But the idea with this is that you mention the key stuff as a summary first, and then you point clients to the information if they want more detail. So a really clear example, a really simple example is if they want to see more information about every single charge that they will pay or something like that, they can go to the platform charges report and they can find it all in there. So that's just a very simple example, but the idea is that you point them towards this other stuff rather than just putting it all into one massive report.
Perfect. Yeah, completely agree, Dan. And something that I'll kind of cover off later on is the difference between assessing suitability and suitability report. And I think a lot of the time that kind of gets muddled up. And so you just throw everything at this document. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly versions of annual reviews. So yeah, something that I'll definitely come on to later. So our kind of second point was creating files and not reports. So this is kind of split into two things, really. So Dan, if you'd like to do the honor, lovely. So instead of cramming into one report, share a folder with the client. So for example, I have seen this before where you'll have an annual review and I've seen, 10 versions of cash flow documents copied into the report, even snippets of illustrations, for example. Actually, just signpost to that illustration within the report and have those documents in a nice, tidy file that you could share with the client. It just makes things a little bit more concise and more readable for the client. And then second point is put the valuable stuff into the report and summarize it all. Absolutely. You don't need to give war and peace about what you've recommended, etc. It's very much just put in the things that are valuable. And when we say valuable, we mean tying back to the client's objectives and why you've recommended it. You don't need to put every bit of research into the report. And yeah, everything else, cash flow report, illustrations, etc., can just go in a nice, tidy file. What I think is probably easiest and maybe quite good practice is when you are creating a client file. So if, for example, the FCA was to look at that annual review, we split it into different elements. So it could be the KYC element, the research element, the report, and then the report enclosures. And it could be that, that whole file is actually the assessing suitability and the suitability report. And then the two bits that you share with the client is literally just the suitability report and the supporting enclosures. And that could be where you save your illustration, your cash flows, etc. If you want to put things like a financial statement, I've seen this so many times in annual reviews where you list how old a client is, where they live, etc. Just put that as a separate document in the supporting enclosures so that they can cross-check that if you're not doing that at annual review. So just breaking things down, signposting where possible, I think is really key to making things clear and concise.
Yeah, completely agree. And just to explain everybody as well, I've put the I don't know if you've noticed on your screen as well, Sasha, I'll put it full screen now rather than separate side by side. I think it was just stuck with me on the screen, and I would never, ever, ever want anybody to have to sit through that. So we've changed it now. Thanks, Rich, for your kind words as well about us looking great on screen. So next point is to use traffic lights. Now, this one is probably one of the most contentious ones that I've come across sometimes. Some people love them, some people really don't like them, some people are a bit kind of like in the middle between them. I think these are really, really cool. tools for and for clients, they are really, really, really powerful as well. And they're so, one of the things I love about them the most is that they're so simple to include in your stuff. They shouldn't just be included for like kind of hygiene purposes. They shouldn't just be included as just because you think they should go in there. If you can find a way to make these things really, really valuable for your clients, there is a really, really good argument for using them in your reports. So one way that, as you can see on the last one there, you can see that how people would use them is to track progress. So you can either have traffic lights, you can have speedometers, you can have trackers, you can all have all sorts of different things just to say across different areas of a client's life, how are they doing with these? And it doesn't need to be anything too kind of traditional or kind of formal or anything like that. You can be quite colloquial with this. So for example, if it's a green, you can say you're doing great. Obviously, we'll make sure to keep on tracking this stuff going forward. If it's a red, then you can say we need to make some changes to this, and then you can say what those changes might be. The point of it is that you're just kind of identifying to a client in front of their eyes, oh God, I need to really kind of get used to the understanding that I need to make certain actions in these different areas. And that's one of the best ways to get clients engaged with this kind of stuff, is to point out where the areas are. So for example, some people use them for things like tax planning, retirement planning, investments, like you can see on that example I've just shared with you there. Some people use them for objectives. So I've seen some people kind of have the objective, which is, for example, retire at 60, or the one I always give is, everybody's probably heard it, but buying a camper van when they're age 65 or something like that. You can literally say you're on track to do these kind of things. And again, it just kind of brings it to life for the client. It gets this stuff away from being simply just that, technical finance. I know we are in finance, but it's kind of like less focused on more on the finance elements and more focused on the human elements, which is where, as we know, that's the bit that really cuts through with clients as well. And that is such a simple change that you can do. Like I've already mentioned, you can use things like speedometers, you can use progress bars. If you use something like Canva, or you use kind of Visme or something like that online, there is an unlimited amount of things that you can do to make this kind of stuff look really, really cool. So next one is kind of linked to that, and it's to use visuals. Now, obviously, you were probably expecting this from me at some point throughout today. Again, this is a bit more of a one where it's unlimited, because there's so many things that you could do. One of the ones that people use this for the most is, as you can see on that example there, it's things like risk levels. It's things like visualizing to clients what they want to do with their lives. So there's a really good firm that we work with where they change the pictures in the report to match what the client actually is wanting to do. So for example, if they wanted to go to Rome and see the Trevi Fountain, they can drag in an image of Rome and Trevi Fountain into there. Just kind of makes it tiny, tiny touches, but makes it a lot more personal to clients as well. And the whole point behind visuals is that it just breaks up that text. I would imagine that if I said to you guys now an annual suitability report, I can almost see verbatim what you are seeing in your heads right now. It's a white Microsoft Word document with loads and loads and loads of text, maybe a few bits of bold in there to spread it up a little bit. It's got loads of page numbers everywhere. It's just full of text. Visuals break that up a little bit. So it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of the text, but it just means that it breaks it up a little bit. And like I said on there's loads of tools available now. There is obviously standard ones, like I've mentioned, like Canva and that kind of stuff. Even Microsoft Word, you can be really, really visual using Microsoft Word. PowerPoint presentations. There is AI tools you can do nowadays to get you to create different visuals and that kind of stuff. That's if you want to be more creative on that side of things. That's not an excuse anymore to not have the tool. We've got the tools available. We just need to work out how to put them into our documents. As I've already mentioned, they work really well for risk, asset allocation as well. So showing clients where all their money actually is, and rather than just copy and pasting an FE TrustNet kind of pie chart into there, you can make it look a bit more branded and a bit more funky, and obviously charges as well. And like I've already mentioned there, they break up text, and the key point with that is that they increase the understanding massively for clients as well. Is this your
Perfect.
one? This is your
Yeah,
one, isn't
this
it?
is
The
me.
most random one.
So when we say be a parrot, we're talking about using clients' own words, essentially. So first kind of point really, It's an old technique, but yeah, use your client's own words. The cases that we find from a paraplanning perspective that's so much easier and enjoyable to write is the ones that actually have clients' own words, because it makes things so easy to be able to talk about, you know, the recommendations, why it's suitable for them and how it meets their objectives. We see so many times where objectives are very, what I would call vanilla, very safe, but actually using the client's own words will actually help the client as well be more engaged, and, you know, more readable and enjoyable for the client as well to read. Second point, it engages the IKEA effect. So they're more likely to take part and care. So the IKEA effect is basically where people tend to value something more if they help to assemble it themselves. So, you know, we're not asking them to build furniture here, but we are asking them to help but build their financial plan. You know, if they feel that they're part of their financial journey, and they're invested in it, and that's reflected within the report, they are going to feel more engaged and more inclined to want to read that. So yeah, definitely helps the client feel more in control of their financial planning journey and more empowered as well. And then point 3, don't hide it, make it front and center for objectives. So yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, you know, make it personal. So as Dan said earlier, everyone's buying a camper van at age 65. You know, that might be what they want to do. That is important to them. That's what makes their financial plan so unique. And what makes you as financial planners, your role and profession so enjoyable, because every client is different and have different objectives and needs. One thing I would say, if you are having trouble with note taking and things like that during meetings, there's so many things now, you know, AI type dictation tools, or having even a paraplanner or admin in the meeting to help capture, you know, those snippets of words that you're like, that is their objective. That's like gold dust that we can put in the report. And if you get that and you can pass it on to the paraplanner, it's just going to make everything so much smoother and also more personalized as well.
Yeah. I think as well, like the key with this, I completely agree. The key is with that, that objective is then turned into a solution, obviously. So I think what a lot of people do in these reports sometimes, and I think you probably see this more than me, Sasha, is that they turn solutions into objectives. And that's not an objective at all.
Yeah,
You
tax
know,
efficient capital growth seems to be the favorite. Yeah. But I mean, I'm not a financial planner, but I can't imagine many clients going to meetings going, do you know what I really want to achieve? It's tax efficient capital growth, please.
or perhaps, I mean, yeah, I agree, but I think perhaps maybe they do say that, but it's not, it's then it's why do you want that? And
Yes,
the,
it's
the,
the
the
why.
why that
Yeah.
is the crucial point, and that's why clients' own words, or how I think it used to be called, didn't it? We got a bit mick taken out of us last week on Twitter for using that. Is such a good and a tried and tested technique, is because it actually does that. It takes it away from the solutions and makes it more about the objectives as well. So, um, this is yours. I think this is your one, isn't it?
This is
Yeah.
me. Yep. So speak like a human. So one thing that I have been guilty of when I started in my paraplanning career was, let's be as fancy as possible, because it made me feel, you know, like I was really clever, that I could use the thesaurus for, you know, absolutely everything. But actually, over the years, and one thing that we really try to incorporate now is the use of plain English. And if you're not familiar with the Plain English sort of initiative, there's so much online that you can read up on, and it's really super simple, believe it or not. So the first point is, don't use jargon and complicated sentences. I think we're all guilty of this, you know, writing sentences after sentences, and sometimes you just need to look back and say, well, actually, how can I break this up into sentences which are a maximum of 15 to 20 words, a bit more bite size, and easier for us to write, but also it's faster for the client to read as well. So that's really important. The second point is reframe things how you would say them, not how the industry says them. So it could be for something really complicated. Perhaps there's a client that's doing retirement planning and they can't quite grasp all the different rules. I mean, all the changes that have come in at the moment, it puts my head in a bit of a spin. Could it be something that you could put into a visual? Could it be something that you could have a short snippet video that explains it in kind of layman's terms, that goes alongside that? Or even something as simple as you have a glossary at the back that just kind of helps the client to understand those words that we use all the time, fad, etc. Perfect. And then don't be afraid to be colloquial with the right client. So you'll be the best judge of character in terms of, how clients like to be addressed. Some do like things to be formal and quite professional, but a lot of clients, they want that conversational tone and they want how you spoke to them in the meeting to be reflected in the report, because when they get that report back, and you're talking about them in a completely different way, it almost doesn't fit that experience that they've had in the meeting. So you want that client journey to be consistent. So it's using just friendlier words, and especially using you and we. So talking about them in those conversational tones is really important.
Yeah. And just to kind of again, I mentioned another tool that's out there. I mean, I've got AI fatigue. I don't know about everybody else. It's kind of like, can I go an hour without hearing about AI? I'm afraid I'm going to break that rule. There are, I mean, obviously you've got to be careful with things like client data and that kind of stuff, but there are really cool tools now that you can use using AI to rephrase things and say, make this simpler, make this easier to understand. Obviously vet it afterwards, because some of the stuff it throws out is absolutely terrible. But you can use AI to, if you're having like trouble kind of saying, how am I going to make this easier to understand? It is inherently complicated. That's why AI exists, is to try and get through that barrier for you as well. So just a tool there that you can use. There's loads of them out there. I'm not going to go into any of them. You probably know which ones I'm thinking about anyways.
Perfect. And the next one is include cash flow. So not everyone uses cash flows, and that's absolutely fine. But I think where cash flow planning is a big part of your financial planning journeys with clients, then actually having that visual representation of their situation, and also for them being able to have a look back at what they've achieved over their financial planning journey as their objectives and needs change, perhaps through different life stages, is really great. So yeah, it helps to visualize things for clients. I'm a very visual person. I love pictures. I'm super simple. Any pictures really engages me. And I actually read that a study recently, and it said that people retain 80% of what they see versus 20% of what they read. So if they can clearly see their financial planning journey in a visual, then that's almost going to help reassure them of, yeah, I'm in the right place, or actually there's a few things we need to do to get to that place. Yeah, you don't need to include every chart, just the important ones. So kind of leading back to, what Dan said earlier with the less is more. If you want to put various scenarios, then you could include that as a separate, enclosure with the report, and maybe just have the current position and a what if scenario within the report. So keep things really clean. And again, you can use it to track objectives and the what for. And it's great. I find it really helps when you're looking at capacity for loss and how we can meet client objectives.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, most of the time now with these cash flow tools, you don't actually have to sit there and put the information in. Many tools will link with back offices, and some will even give the client the opportunity to update their financial information each year. So it doesn't have to be such a big task as it used to be back in the day, where you'd be, typing everything in. Once you've done that base plan, you're just literally updating that every year, and it could be, 10, 15 minutes.
And I think from a visual perspective, it's a really interesting stat that you mentioned there, Sasha. I've seen that one a few times. Um, it's even if they just see it as a load of colorful bars and that kind of stuff, which I know a lot of clients do like their pretty colors, don't they? That's exactly what it can be, is just a differentiator or just a break, just to break up the rest of the text or just to break up the rest
Hmm.
of the report. Is if that's all it does and it just kind of just signals that it's the beginning of a new part of the report or something like that, then that's really, really super duper useful. You don't actually need to include this stuff in terms of, like, I don't think there's any regulatory or anything like that requirement to have them in there. But even if it just does that, I think that's really good. And then just one more point, sorry, before you move on to your next one, Side, is that I'm going to talk about Loom at the end because I can't do one of these webinars without mentioning videos. Is to record. So if you don't want to just include loads of charts, you can record yourself on Loom, or there's loads of tools out there again to do this kind of stuff, and then you can embed that in these annual review reports as a section, and have it there so the client can watch it. There might be a link or something like that, or sometimes you can actually embed them into the documents themselves, just so that they can understand it a little bit more better. And it's you who's explaining it with your own words rather than typing it into a report as well. I've seen some people do it and it works really well. So again, just try and get creative with how you use cash flow as well, would be my opinion on that one.
Perfect. And adapt for clients. So this is kind of, yeah, well, we want to make things as personal as possible without, doubling everyone's workload potentially. So the first point that we've got is some clients will want short, some will want details. So you might have someone who has perhaps a financial industry background and they want the nitty-gritty detail.
Mm.
Absolutely. Try and bespoke that to the client. You could add an extra appendice if they want, performance information over a certain period or anything like that. You can make those changes and make it more personal. Some clients will want videos, some will want text. And I think one thing that is quite handy to do with clients, whether it's at sign up or maybe at each annual review, is just kind of going over their preferences. So checking with them, how do you best engage with the information that we send you? It could be as easy as, they want a bigger font size, the type of language that they use, whether they want videos or visuals. Being able to make perhaps those small changes will really help the client to engage in their financial planning journey. Appreciate, it's difficult to bespoke for absolutely every client, but if there are certain elements that you could build into your client journey, then you can just note that on the file so that when it comes to their annual review, you can just make those small tweaks that they'll look at that and think, oh, wow, Dan's really listened to me when I said, I find it hard to comprehend long pages of text. He's made things really clear by putting those extra visuals or giving me the same report, but actually talking it through on video so that I can understand it and digest it. And the last point there, some clients will want electronic, some will want paper. That still happens. We still see a lot of clients where they want that physical copy, but being able to ask them how they prefer that to be received is also really important.
Yeah. And I think as well, the one that I included there, if you guys can see that, is actually a 2-page one that we've built for the guys at Lightside. And that one is very much designed to be a quick, no change report where you just kind of tick off the key parts that you've got to mention to clients there. Obviously, for a lot of clients, this will not suffice in terms of what you've got to include in there. So it's just about really understanding, first of all, what clients want, but also which level of clients you're going to do certain bits of stuff with. For those clients who are, so honestly, to be honest, paying you less, then they might get this kind of stuff. But the clients who are paying you more, they will likely and probably justifiably expect something a little bit more detailed. Not too detailed in terms of 70 pages, but a little bit more, as you would probably expect in there as well. So, by the way, we've got about 15 minutes left. So, if anybody does have any questions, just stick them in the Q&A. We've got a few questions in there now, but if you've got any burning questions that you want to ask, we'll come to them at the end. So the next one is strike the balance. And as you can see on there, I've made this really cool illustration. It took me ages to do between compliance needs and client needs. So it's quite handy that they actually kind of rhyme. So as you probably all know, it's every single day I would imagine you guys come across the battle between these two things. And it's about striking that balance in these reports. Because if compliance had it their way, it would be a 6,000 page, I'm exaggerating, report with loads and loads of different things in there that would mean that a client could never be confused. If it was a client's preference, then they would probably want something which is, really, really short and easy to understand for most clients anyways. So it's about striking that balance. So again, I apologize to compliance people. I love compliance people, but just because compliance say you need it doesn't mean that a client values it. And this is probably something that you come across all the time. Just because maybe your compliance team or whatever it is have said that it should be in there, that although you might need to be in there, that doesn't mean that a client actually values it. So for example, even things like attitude to risk and that kind of stuff, when I know that we might find that quite interesting, but to a client, that's an inherently negative term as well, attitude to risk. But also, when we used to talk to our clients, I can't imagine that many of them would have actually found it that interesting. Of course, you need to include it, but if we can try and think of a way to make it more exciting for clients to actually engage with, then we've won. And on the other side of things, just because you don't need to include it doesn't mean you shouldn't. And this is one that we come across all the time when it comes to things like charges. I don't think there's any real kind of clarity on what needs to be included in these things in terms of MiFID II and charges and all that kind of stuff. I've heard subjective opinions from loads of different people. Even me and Sasha last week when we were talking about this, we kind of couldn't figure out what it actually is. But just because you don't need to with charges, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't include them. So it's really nice and transparent to say to clients, here's a summary of what you paid us the last year. Here's a summary of what you can expect to pay us, the platform, the fund, all that kind of stuff in the next 12 months. If I was a client, personally, I would want to see that kind of stuff in there because it just shows that there's no barriers or there's nothing being hidden from me at that time. And obviously find the right balance between compliance and between clients. You can find that balance in something which is quite short and engaging. There's no rules from the FCA or no rules from compliance on how engaging you can make a document. In fact, they want you to make it more engaging. So that shouldn't be the barrier. And that's why it shouldn't be that we just default to boring long word reports anymore. You can be a bit more exciting than that and still tick that compliance box on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I'll kind of add to that really is going back to the assessing suitability and suitability report. The assessing suitability is your KYC, your fact find, your risk profile evidence, etc. Everything that needs to be on the file. And then the actual annual review report itself, there's hardly anything that the FCA want you to put in. So it's very much objectives, risk profile, continued suitability. So why does that particular investment or product link back to the objectives, and is it still meeting those objectives? And then a charges estimate for the next 12 months. And a lot of firms will then signpost to the previous 12 months of charges, for example. But yeah, it's really, really simple what actually needs to go in the report. But I think a lot of people mix those into one. And then that's when you see the 60 pages that, it makes me cry inside.
And clients, I would imagine as well.
Yeah.
So final one, it couldn't be a webinar, like I mentioned, from us without mentioning things like Loom videos and that kind of stuff. These are awesome tools. They can really change the kind of feeling and flow of these reports. And you can get quite creative with them. So if anybody hasn't seen a Loom video before, it's basically where you share your screen and you have you in the bottom left-hand corner, right-hand corner, wherever it is, of just talking through something. And they're designed to be very short. They're actually designed to save you sending emails. So every time you create a video on Loom, it'll say, congratulations, you just saved somebody reading an email, something like that. And that's exactly what it's there for. So what some people do with this is they record a quick Loom of them going through the summary. So they'll record themselves going through the whole document in their own words very quickly, and then they'll put a kind of button in there at the start which just says watch a video summary of this. It takes you 5 minutes to do. Again, puts you in front of the client a little bit more, and it kind of increases that value that they receive. So really simple to do. It means they can watch it at their own leisure. So it means that once they've finished in a meeting with you and they think, actually, I can't remember why he said that we need to do this or whatever, they can go and watch the video back in your own words and they can find it there. Again, amazing for ticking those, as I put on there, boxes such as consumer duty, file checks, compliance, all that kind of stuff, because you've literally evidenced you communicating to a client what they need to know and what they need to understand. So I think this is where the real differentiator between those firms who are kind of really getting creative at the moment and those who aren't is this kind of stuff at the moment. It's the videos, it's the little touches, it's the kind of tools that are available nowadays that used to be so complex and so difficult to use. Now, you can use them in 5 minutes and they're actually easier. So we can start integrating this kind of stuff in there. Your clients will love it. You'll make you look world class as well. And also it's great for compliance. So massive ticks from me. Before we finish, Sasha, anything on Loom videos?
I think you've got it covered. I know how much you love them, Dan. So I didn't want to steal the limelight from the Loom
Yeah,
videos.
I will apologize to everybody actually for always talking. It's like a special interest to me. It's ridiculous.
Are you paid commission?
I'm actually not as well, but I need to because the amount of time I mention it, it's actually ridiculous. So that is all from us for today. We've got some questions in there which we'll come to. If you want to find out more about the Paraplan project, you can scan the QR code on screen there. I tested this the other day, Sasha, and it works. So if you want to find out more information about what Sasha does, head to the Paraplan project. And equally, you can book some time with me on Calendly there and find out more about what we do at docVinci as well. So we do have some questions. If anybody does want to say hello or just let us know that they're going, then obviously you can stick that in the Q&A as well. If anybody is leaving us now, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure it's been Sasha's pleasure as well. And how amazing is Sasha, by the way? She's an absolute ninja at this kind of stuff. So thank you so much for joining. We'll get to the questions now, but if you're leaving us now, thank you, and we'll see you in the next one. So a few questions in here. We've got, is this being recorded? Yes, you'll get a replay as well. Somebody's asked, any recommendations for file services to use for such things? So I would imagine this is in relation to point 2, I think, Sasha, where we're talking about sharing files. So he put in there, Dropbox is problematic as data servers are held in the US. So data services are outside of GDPR. And he said it's also something that would need to be accessible over the lifetime of the relationship. So any kind of thoughts on that one there, Sasha?
Yeah, we see a couple of different things that firms use. So those that use IO for back office, they actually have, I think it's called PFP, so like a client portal that you can send documents through securely. So a lot of back offices, I would imagine, are starting to use this kind of portal access. Another way of being able to share documents could be through Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, which is what we use from our perspective when sharing client sensitive information between ourselves and the firms that we work with.
Yeah.
But I would always recommend that you speak to your IT provider just to kind of get clarity in terms of that everything's covered off with GDPR. We were saying, you were touching on there earlier about AI. Yeah, be very careful in terms of the types of programs that you use. So always speak to an IT team just to get the best kind of advice on that and make sure things are secure.
Yeah. I haven't got anything to add to that. Agree with everything you just said there. Like I said, most people are using portals and stuff like that nowadays.
Yeah.
So we come across most of them, to be honest. Richard has got a question for you, Sasha, which is, how do you embed traffic lights into a document that look good?
Well, most of the time, we will try and have just a one pager. So it will follow kind of like an executive summary. A lot of the visuals is provided to us by the advisor in terms of the template that they use. They might use someone, like your fabulous self at docVinci to create that. But one thing that I would say is that if you are going to use anything like those traffic light systems, is as a financial planner, is making sure that you put that information into meeting notes or a handover so that it's easy to digest for the paraplanner, because we've seen it a few times where advisors love the idea, but then we get the meeting notes, and we can't actually be able to interpret that into that traffic light system, and what the outcome of that was. So I think if you are thinking of using anything like that, then make sure that you're capturing those different areas that are within that traffic light system at the meeting, so that it's then easier to be able to interpret and relay within the actual report itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it could even, in terms of from a design perspective, Richard, it doesn't even need to be something as out there as what we've just shown you on screen there. It can even just be a table on Microsoft Word where you fill in, you just change a cell color to green if they're doing good or something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily need to be something that we've just shown you there. It can even just be as something as simple as being a Microsoft Word. It's just the colors and the simplicity that is the key points. It's not necessarily how it actually looks in the end. And I would imagine that this is way more valuable than or way more comprehensible for clients than just putting in a paragraph which explains it in words. It's a lot more kind of engaging for clients to understand.
Yeah.
Russell says less numbers, more in progress in life. Like that. Good quote. Wilf asks, any best practices for including links for clients who prefer paper? So do you print everything or include as QR code / bit.ly link or alternative? It's a good question, that. We don't really come across that many clients who are still printing, oh, sorry, that many advice firms who are still printing everything. But I do like the QR code idea. That's good, especially for printed stuff. It doesn't work with digital stuff apart from webinars, because then I would imagine you guys are watching this on your desktop and you can scan it using your phone. That kind of stuff. But I don't know. Any thoughts from you on that one, Sasha? I think
I mean, we don't really see the kind of output in terms of when it goes back to the firms, but I know a lot of them will still print illustrations and some of the supporting documents, but things like key features documents, a lot of the time you can probably, email them a copy and they would be happy with that. So it could be just, calling them up saying, we've got quite a lot to pass on to you. Are you happy with some of the documents to be emailed, which are the more generic documents, and then the client sensitive ones are then posted, or perhaps we use something like these sharing files if they're happy with that.
Yeah. Next question from Richard. He says, Dan, regarding Lightside, looks like that's done in a design tool. How does it translate to Word, etc., personalization, and still retain the designing? It's a long story with the Lightside one, and if Sean and Vicky are in the audience, then they'll probably tell you. But so we originally intended for this one to be a editable PDF form, but what they found was they kind of needed a bit more flexibility in terms of adding new areas and that kind of stuff. So we actually made it, that is a Word document that you've seen there. It's just that we've stretched Microsoft Word to the very, very limits of its design capabilities. So you can kind of feel Microsoft Word punching back at us and saying, no, I'm not designed for this kind of thing. But we just kind of smashed through and just went with it anyways. Don't get me wrong, in an ideal world, and hopefully in a world not too far from now, we will have built something that will allow you to be able to do this. But for now, it's things like Microsoft Word, it's things like PDF forms. You can actually create some really, really cool stuff using editable PDF forms. Like you said, though, it's just, like I said, it's about the flexibility that comes with that kind of stuff as well. Chris asks, would you recommend using something like Canva to create the reports rather than Microsoft Word? I would, but that's because I've been using Canva for 7 years. And don't get me wrong, it's dead easy to use. But what a lot of people find is, and we kind of describe this, it's operational effectiveness versus design. You want something where it doesn't add loads of stress and time onto your team, because the last thing you want to do is tell them, right, we're using Canva now, even though you don't know how to use it. That's not something you want to do. Most people are used to Microsoft Word, but if you can use Canva to create these things, then the amount of stuff that allows you to do is amazing. I would just check, because it's an online tool, to make sure that there's no problems with things like data and that kind of stuff. I don't think there are, because I think Canva's got all of the right security things and all that kind of stuff. And it's a private tool, but there is a tool on there where you can make it a public view. So we just need to make sure that there's no danger of that happening for clients, especially with sensitive client data like this as well.
Yeah. And one thing I would kind of add to that is for some firms that we work with, they'll have Microsoft Word for the actual report, but we'll actually create some of the visuals in Canva and then drop that into Microsoft Word. So then you're not fully, committed in terms of switching over. You can just add those visuals from Canva and drag and drop them, and they seem to work quite well. So you could kind of look at that if you don't want to change the whole process.
Yeah, exactly. And what I mentioned before, speedometers, Canva have one of my favorite
Yeah.
things on Canva is the speedometer or the progress tracker tool. Those kind of things, they can make the report look so much better just by dragging those kind of things in there. So you
Hmm.
create it in Canva in 20 seconds, download it as a transparent PNG, and then drag it into the Microsoft Word, and it looks, miles better, with what, a minute's work, something like that, maybe. So it's not too difficult to do. Um, Someone's asked, for your documents, what software do you use to make them easily editable for the advisors slash paraplanners without them being able to change or damage the visual layout? Good question. I think we've probably already answered that one. Yeah, you mentioned about the flexibility. That is something we come across a lot. John says, I've had a quick look at Loom. I'd be very interested in a template approach to help structure a video summary of cash flow, etc. If others more experienced in the area would share their insights. So if anybody does, put them into the Q&A there, and we'll link you guys up. Please, can you provide any super useful AI-powered tools? Oh, goodness me. I'll figure out some way to get. I'm not going to go through them all now, but I'll figure out some way of getting them across, and Sasha will send some ideas over as well. But there's
Yeah.
loads out there. If you just search AI tool for rewriting, I'd imagine you'll probably get like 3 million Google results or something like that. Bavika says, do you feel PowerPoint or editable PDF is better for the visual elements, or is it just personal preference? It's a good question. They're both good. They're both really good, actually. PowerPoint is a bit more kind of flexible because you can add,
Hmm.
remove stuff, which is really good. And then you can still drag in stuff from Canva and stuff like we've already mentioned there as well. So yeah, people who create, there's another one firm that we work with who use Google Slides to create their like annual planning summaries for their clients, and the graphics on there are really, really cool. So yeah, it's a bit more flexible than PDF as well. So good question, Pavika. Aaron says, thanks both. Very useful session. Love the traffic light idea. You're very welcome. I'd imagine we'll see that in his reports soon. Sam says, thank you both for the presentation today. Thank you very much for coming along, Sam. Um, in cases where formal new recommendations are required, would you suggest a client-friendly report as shown, which says high-level objectives, is sent and a separate report is issued to cover the actual formal advice, or tie in together? So you go first, and I'll see if
Yeah,
we agree.
I quite like keeping the less is more.
Mm,
And so for every annual review, you have that same document, obviously it's bespoken where necessary,
mm,
but covering off the annual review. And under the section where it says is it suitable? If it's yes, then there's no further action. If it's no, then you can literally add a one-liner to refer to a separate recommendation report. I think keep it nice and clean and crisp, and follow up with that bed and ISA or that new ISA or a pension switch in a different report, because that is a different bit of advice.
yeah.
So yeah, I think maybe keep it simple. I know everyone has their preferences, but that's kind of my view on it, I think.
That's a relief because I completely agree. So yeah, well, what we kind of, and we've talked about this already, haven't we, Sasha, with one of our mutual clients? But yeah, that's the thing, is that you do these kind of things and assume it's a no change report. If there are the kind of the null hypothesis is that nothing's changing. If there is something changing, you then signpost them to an addendum report or something like that that just goes into more detail about what it is. But yeah, completely agree with what you just said there. Sometimes as well, of course, the recommendations can be quite complex, especially when you start getting
Hmm.
into like inheritance tax and trust and all that kind of stuff. So the report can get quite chunky when you start adding that kind of stuff in there, which is why we always say to separate it out if you can. Rudolph asks, are there any AI tools that I can use to upload a text-heavy PDF compliance document and have the AI regenerate it in a more summarized visual form? I don't know. Is there?
I don't know about PDFs. I mean, you can use things like AI, chat GBT, etc. But again, GDPR, you have to be super careful. So
Yeah.
when we use AI tools here, we use it for more the generic wording where you're like, right, how can I actually explain fad to someone in 2 sentences?
Yeah.
And it can, help you build that and condense it down. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure about PDF, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. If anybody does know, then
I'll,
stick in
I'll
the link.
have a little Google after this.
Link, yeah. Wilf says, thanks, both. Some good insight there, and always good to reflect on how we deliver the best service to the client. And then he's put in brackets and to steal good ideas. Would expect nothing less. Aaron says, opinions on the document being landscape or portrait. This is personal preference. I love landscape personally. So, I know others who love portraits. There's no real kind of like um the reason I love landscape so much is that it's different to other stuff that people receive. So when they receive something that is landscape, it kind of throws them off a little bit because they're expecting something portrait. Um, just from a behavioral perspective, that's why I like them so much. And you can fit more kind of graphical stuff like cash flow and stuff like that on there,
Mhm.
and it's bigger. Ultimately, though, again, I think it's personal preference and client preference as well. And I don't know, do you have anything to add to that, Sasha?
No, completely agree. Completely agree.
Dean says, where can we see templates of the potential possibilities you are recommending? I can't unfortunately share any documents, Dean, because these are copyrighted, belong to the firms that we work with. We can share snippets, but we can't share full documents. So if you want to just book in some time, I'll be more than happy to run through some of the kind of things that we're working on. And I would imagine with Sasha as well, although I know Sasha's got a lot on at the moment. Nicola says, thank you both for your time and expertise today. You're very welcome, Nicola. Thank you very much for coming. And then final comment is from Samantha, who just says, thank you. And thank you for coming as well, Samantha. So I think that's it. We've had a massive amount of people join us today, and I think there was loads of value in there. So, and my dog's just started barking, so now is the perfect time to finish. Sasha,
Perfect.
anything to add before we finish?
No, just thanks very much for letting me join today. I've had great fun and hopefully, yeah, we've helped a few people add a few changes to their annual reviews moving forward.
And we should start seeing people sharing incredible snippets of their new annual review summaries soon, shouldn't we?
Yeah, if anyone actually does make any changes, please show me because
Please don't.
I'd
Yeah,
love to see it.
I
Yeah.
think we're both a bit geeky with this kind of stuff, aren't we? So if anybody does make
Yeah.
any changes, then please send us because we actually want to see
Yeah.
what you
I'm
guys are
a
doing as well.
paraplanner, of course we're geeky,
Yeah,
so
yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Anybody who is watching this now, you'll get a recording and the slides, hopefully tomorrow, and you'll have more information about how to get in touch with Sasha and myself as well. But again, thank you so much to you, Sasha. You've been wonderful as always. Thank you to everybody who turned up today. We'll have another one coming up very, very soon. But for now, have a lovely rest of the week, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Bye bye.